Millionaire falls in love. At first sight with the bridesmaid who was late to his friend's wedding, before we begin the story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Let's dive into the story together. The Rosewood Hotel lobby, 5:38 p.m. Warm golden lights spilled across the polished marble floor. Guests in elegant attire gathered in small clusters, laughter and the clinking of glasses mixing with the scent of fresh-cut flowers. Everything moved with quiet grace until crash. A sharp, sudden sound cut through the air. A young woman had tripped on the carpet, her wine glass flying from her hand. The hem of her long dress caught on her stiletto heel, sending her tumbling straight into a man standing nearby. Red wine splattered across his tailored black suit like a spreading bruise. The glass shattered, her heel twisted, and her face turned a shade of red that no lipstick could match. Emily Carter, 27. Architect. Logical, methodical, always in control. Except apparently when it mattered most. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you, I didn't mean," she stammered, crouching to collect her spilled purse, hands trembling, cheeks on fire. The man didn't speak right away. He simply looked down at her. His gaze was unreadable, sharp, calm, and entirely too focused. "Are you all right?" His voice was low and even, the kind that made people stop talking to listen. Emily looked up, and time seemed to stop. The man towered above her, suit flawless despite the stain, jaw tight, hair neatly styled. His steel-gray eyes locked onto hers, not with irritation, but curiosity. 15 minutes earlier, Emily had been dashing through the hotel's second-floor hallway, gripping her heels with one hand and the train of her dress with the other. Her whisper-muttered mantra was clear. "I'm late, I'm late, I'm late." The cab had shown up 20 minutes late. The driver had raced through traffic like a maniac. Then the elevator was too full. So naturally, she'd sprinted up 3 flights of stairs in heels. Today was her best friend Clara's wedding. Emily was the maid of honor. She was supposed to be early, poised, picture perfect. Instead, sweaty, flustered, and now a human wrecking ball. Back to the lobby. She was still tugging her dress loose from her heel when the man spoke again. "To be honest," he said dryly, "you're the most entertaining opening act I've seen at a wedding." Emily looked up, blinking. "Glad I could set the tone." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not a full smile, but dangerously close. "Well, try not to take anyone else down with you," he said, already turning away. Emily watched him walk off. Tall, composed, unbothered. And for some reason, his voice echoed in her ears long after he disappeared around the corner. Most love stories begin with a glance. This one began with a crash, a spilled glass of red wine, and a man who didn't laugh, but looked like he just might, if only for her. Emily didn't know his name. Not yet. But from the moment he saw her, he knew. He'd be seeing her again. The wedding ceremony unfolded inside a grand hall bathed in soft golden light. Ivory white flowers draped along the aisle, and the scent of fresh roses lingered in the air. Guests sat upright in perfectly aligned rows, the atmosphere polished and serene, almost sacred. Emily had finally slipped into her seat among the bridesmaids, still catching her breath from the whirlwind outside. Her heart pounded from more than just embarrassment, though she'd barely avoided a full-on collision with the floor and a certain man's chest minutes earlier. She glanced at the altar, trying to focus, but something was wrong. Someone was watching her, not glancing, not casually looking. Watching, with intention. She felt it like a ripple down her spine. Emily turned her head slowly and froze. There, seated among the groomsmen in the front row, was the same man she'd crashed into in the hotel lobby, the one with the ruined suit and the unreadable eyes. He was still watching her. His gaze didn't waver, didn't flinch, didn't care who else might be looking. It wasn't annoyance, it wasn't curiosity. It was something else. Quiet, patient, and deeply focused, like he was studying her. Emily jerked her head away, staring forward, pretending to be present as the officiant welcomed the guests, but she could barely hear the words over the pounding of her heart. Beside her, a bridesmaid leaned in with a half-smirk. "You're turning red, Em. Want me to fan you?" Emily muttered under her breath. "Who is that guy?" The bridesmaid, Rachel, gave a quick glance across the aisle, then leaned in closer like she was sharing state secrets. "Brian Fisher, CEO of Fisher Capital. Think Wall Street meets Silent Storm. Multimillionaire, probably secretly a billionaire. No one ever sees him at events like this." Emily blinked. "Then why is he here? Best man," Rachel said with a shrug. "Close friend of the groom." There was a pause. Then Rachel added in a quieter voice. "He was supposed to get married once. Canceled the wedding on the actual day. The bride disappeared after that. No one's ever gotten close to him since." Emily's fingers tightened slightly around her bouquet. A man like that. Guarded, powerful, emotionally locked away. But he was still staring. Still holding her in that gaze. Not out of mockery. Not even attraction in the obvious sense. No. His stare felt deliberate, like he was seeing something no one else did. She forced herself to look away. Focus on the ceremony, on Clara, on anything but him. But she could feel it. His eyes were still there. Some glances are fleeting. But some stay. They dig into your memory like a thread you can't pull free. Emily Carter didn't know who exactly Brian Fisher was. But Brian? He already knew one thing for sure. He couldn't look away. The ballroom glowed like a dream. Candles flickered inside golden sconces, and soft jazz curled lazily through the air, weaving between the crystal chandeliers and the sound of polite laughter. Every surface shimmered with elegance. Emily reached for a glass of red wine from a passing tray, just as she turned. Too fast, too distracted, too late. She collided hard into someone. The wine lifted in an arc, slow motion in her mind. A splash of red struck the front of a perfectly tailored black suit. The stemless glass slipped from her fingers, bouncing off the man's arm before tumbling to the carpet. Her heart stopped. "No, no, please," she gasped, eyes wide, cheeks flushing hot. She looked up. It was him. Brian Fisher. Again. He looked down at the red stain slowly spreading across his shirt, then back at her. His eyes, gray-blue and steady, didn't blink. Emily scrambled for words. I'm really sorry. That was, oh God, I'll find a napkin or... But Brian, without flinching, peeled off his jacket and folded it over his arm with casual precision. "It's just wine," he said, voice low, even. She blinked. "You're not mad?" "Not yet," he replied, a small smirk touching the edge of his mouth. "But if you don't sit down with me at the bar, I might reconsider." Emily stared at him, stunned. "That sounds suspiciously like blackmail." "Only if you say no." They walked together toward the bar, set off to one side, away from the glittering crowd. The lights there were lower, the noise more muted. It felt like stepping behind the curtain of the evening. Emily took a seat, crossing one leg over the other with practiced elegance, though she still felt the heat of her embarrassment. "I should probably order the most absurd drink here," she said, feigning mischief. "Just to make this moment worth the trauma." Brian sat beside her, settling in like he belonged in every room. "You think I care about what anything costs?" "That's why it'd be fun," she said, smiling despite herself. The bartender approached. "2 whiskeys, Emily said. Neat. Brian raised a brow but didn't object. When the drinks arrived, she took hers, swirled it slightly, and watched the amber liquid catch the dim bar light. So, she began slowly. Brian Fisher, do you always wear $1,000 suits just to catch flying glasses of wine? Only when I'm feeling lucky. She narrowed her eyes. Is that what this is? Luck? I've had worse collisions. She laughed, genuine, surprised. It startled her more than the wine. You're not what I expected, she said, tilting her head. No. I thought you'd be colder, less conversational. I get that a lot. Emily studied him. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze was too focused, too still. He said, almost absently, I don't talk much at events like this. Then why are you talking to me? Brian didn't answer immediately. He picked up his glass and took a slow sip. Then, setting it down, he met her eyes again. I watch. I listen. It's a habit. To what exactly? To how people move, what they say when they don't think anyone's paying attention. She hesitated. And what did I say? He held her gaze. You didn't say anything, he murmured. That's what made me look twice. The pause between them thickened. The chatter of the ballroom dimmed. Emily felt her pulse in her fingertips. That almost sounded sincere. Almost? You're not easy to read, she said, voice softer now. Good, he replied. Neither are you. Her mouth curved, resisting a smile. The whiskey warmed her throat, but his words did something else entirely. A silence settled between them. Not awkward, but rich. The kind that said neither wanted to break it. Finally, Emily cleared her throat. Well, this has been unexpectedly pleasant. Only pleasant? She turned to him, letting the air shift again. Dangerously pleasant, the curve of Claire's smile, the way Brian's jaw tensed, just enough to reveal something unsaid, something unresolved. And suddenly, the music wasn't sweet anymore. It was noise. Emily turned, walking away before her expression could betray her. But just as she reached the edge of the dance floor, his voice followed, low and certain. I once loved the wrong person, Brian said, loud enough for her to hear. This time, I don't want to get it wrong. Emily didn't stop walking. She didn't look back. But his words struck something raw in her chest. Because she wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe this wasn't just another misstep. But trust didn't come easily. Not when the past still lingered in the shadows. Not when the glass walls of Horizon Construction gleamed under the pale morning light. Outside, the city pulsed with motion. But inside, it was quiet. Too quiet. Emily walked in, balancing her coffee in one hand and a project folder in the other. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor as she entered the conference room, expecting the usual chaos of early week meetings. What she didn't expect was him. Brian Fisher. Sitting at the head of the table like he belonged there. Which, apparently, he did. He was calm, focused, reading through the project documents with the same sharp concentration that made his reputation legendary in boardrooms across the country. For a second, Emily froze. She could feel her pulse in her ears. No, this can't be real. Their eyes met across the room. Gone was the man who had whispered promises on a crowded dance floor. In his place sat a figure of control and calculation. Pressed suit, unreadable face, every detail immaculate. Except the eyes. The eyes still held something else, something personal. Emily blinked hard, forcing her expression into something neutral, something professional. Emily, Oliver, the firm's director, called out, waving her over without looking up. This is Mr. Fisher, our new lead investor on the Richmond Tower project. Lead investor. She couldn't breathe for a moment. Brian stood politely and extended his hand like a stranger. Miss Carter. Her fingers met his in a brief, cool handshake. Her voice, when it came, didn't feel like hers. Mr. Fisher. Everyone else seemed oblivious. No one else knew. But inside, her mind was spinning. Why him? Why this project? Why now? She sat 2 seats away, deliberately distant, trying to focus on the meeting, but every word blurred under the weight of his presence. Brian didn't look at her again. Not once. His voice, when he spoke, was crisp and businesslike. No teasing, no softness. It was worse than if he'd been flirtatious. It was like she didn't exist. And yet, she felt him. Every move, every breath, like gravity was pulling them toward each other in a room where neither was allowed to flinch. She told herself it was just a coincidence. She told herself he didn't know. But when the meeting ended, and everyone stood to leave, he looked at her, just for a moment, and said, "I knew it was you before I even walked in." Then he turned and left, leaving her standing in the conference room, coffee cold in her hand, and 100 unspoken questions twisting like a storm inside her. Why here? Why now? And what in God's name was he planning next? The music had stopped playing long before the dance was done. The conference room was sharp with tension. Glass walls, white light, and too many carefully chosen words. But beneath the professional facade, something else simmered. Emily sat rigidly 2 chairs away from Brian, hands flat on the table, pen poised like a weapon she might throw. Her voice, when she spoke, was clipped, precise, and completely detached. Brian, on the other hand, was infuriatingly calm. He leaned back slightly, one arm draped over the chair, tapping his pen against the folder. Watching her. Always watching her. No one else in the room noticed. Or if they did, they pretended not to. Because what man like Brian Fisher chose to fixate on someone like Emily Carter? Finally, in the middle of a routine discussion on load-bearing walls, he said it. Calm. Quiet. Intentional. You always this distracted when someone looks at you too long? The table fell into a stunned hush. A nervous chuckle from someone across the room. The hum of the air conditioner suddenly felt louder. Emily didn't look at him. She didn't have to. Her fingers curled into fists in her lap. I think we're here to talk about the tower, she said without blinking. Brian offered the faintest curve of a smile. Of course. The meeting stumbled forward. Numbers, approvals, schedule slippage, but the damage was done. When it ended, she was the first to rise. She didn't wait for the others to clear the room. She pushed through the door and out onto the open-air balcony that overlooked the city. The wind caught her hair. She pressed both palms against the cold metal railing, breathing hard. Behind her, she heard the door open. She didn't turn. You just can't help yourself, can you? She said, voice trembling, not with fear, but control. Brian stopped a few steps behind her. He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was lower, calmer. I was being honest. Emily turned slowly, eyes narrowed. No, you were being cruel. You used that room full of people to remind me of something we both agreed to forget. I didn't agree to forget, Brian said. She shook her head, voice rising. Then let me remind you. This is my job, my life. You don't get to come in here and... What, Emily? He cut in, stepping closer. What am I doing that's so wrong? Looking at you? Wanting to understand why you're pretending like nothing happened when we both know that's a lie? Because I have to, she snapped. Because you showing up in that room, in that project, that was never supposed to happen. I didn't plan this either, Brian said. But now that I'm here, I'm not going to pretend like you're just another name on a floor plan. She blinked, hard, His voice softened. You can keep putting on the mask, keep saying all the right things, but your hands shake every time I'm near. Emily crossed her arms, trying to steady her breathing. You think this is romantic? Stalking me through boardrooms and making vague emotional threats? I think it's real. That stopped her. Brian stepped even closer, eyes locked with hers. You can lie to your coworkers, your boss, even yourself. But don't lie to your heart, Emily. It knows better. Her throat tightened, her chest ached, but she forced herself to laugh. Dry, bitter. Wow, that was a great line. Did you rehearse it on the drive over? He didn't flinch. He just watched her, silent and steady, like he could see past every layer she tried to wrap around herself. And maybe he could. Then, with a sigh, he stepped back. I can wait, he said, but not forever. She didn't move. Brian turned and walked away, the door hissing shut behind him with a soft click. Alone, Emily stood in the wind, her heart pounding so loud it echoed in her ears. She stared out at the skyline, her hands trembling where they gripped the railing. Because the truth was, he was right. And that terrified her more than anything else in the world. The storm didn't come with thunder. It came quietly, in whispers, in side eyes, in poorly disguised emails with subject lines that said one thing and meant another. Emily didn't hear it from her boss, or HR. She heard it from the pause in the hallway conversation as she walked past, from the way the intern stopped mid-sentence and quickly looked away, from the tone of the receptionist's voice when she said, "Someone from compliance asked for a copy of your meeting logs." The rumor had arrived, and it was ugly. She slept her way into this project. She's the reason Brian Fisher's investing so much. CEO's little pet. No one said it to her face. But Emily could feel it, hanging in the air like the scent of something rotting. Every glance was sharper, every greeting colder. By Thursday, the director called her in. No accusations, just protocol. A routine internal inquiry, standard questions. Were there any conflicts of interest you should disclose, Ms. Carter? Did Mr. Fisher ever express undue influence regarding project assignments? Are you involved with him personally? She answered calmly, professionally. But inside she was shaking. Not because she had anything to hide, but because it hurt. She had worked for 10 years to build her name. And now, one unspoken connection. A gaze too long, a dinner too late, a feeling too complicated, was enough to burn it all down. That night, she didn't cry. She couldn't. She just sat in the dark of her apartment, hands folded in her lap, and stared at the wall. Then Friday came. And with it, Brian. He didn't walk into the meeting room with his usual calm stride. He moved like someone carrying something heavy. Too heavy. When the executive board assembled, he stood, not at the head of the table, but beside it. "I'll keep this brief," he said. "Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing my firm's financial involvement in the Richmond Tower project. Our shares will be sold and transitioned to a neutral third-party partner." Silence. Not a gasp. Not a word. Just the kind of stillness that happens when no one knows if what they're hearing is real. "Mr. Fisher," someone began, but he raised a hand. "This is not a negotiation." Across the table, Emily froze. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't process what she'd just heard. It was only after the meeting ended, after the others had filed out in a stunned hush, that she found herself standing in the hallway, staring at him as he buttoned his coat. "Why?" she whispered. He turned, slowly, looked at her, not as the CEO, not as the investor, just a man. "I can start another project," he said, his voice steady, quiet. "But if I let you lose faith in who I am, I won't get another chance to fix that." Her breath caught. Brian looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Simple, final, and walked away down the hallway. Not fast, not slow, just away. And all Emily could do was watch. Because in that single act, he said everything she wasn't ready to hear. He didn't fight back. He didn't defend himself. He didn't ask her to choose. He simply stepped aside. For her. And in that unbearable quiet, something inside her shifted. She had spent so long trying to protect herself. But maybe now, it was her turn to fight for him. Emily didn't show up to work the next day. No calls, no emails, no explanations. She wasn't sick. She wasn't out of town. She just couldn't face it. Not the office, not the whispers, not him. Her apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock she never bothered to fix. Rain tapped against the windows, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat slowed down. She sat curled on the edge of the couch, still in the same clothes from the night before, coffee untouched on the table. The TV was on, muted. Static light flickered across her face, but her eyes weren't really watching. Then, a knock. Not loud, not impatient, just steady. She didn't move at first. Maybe it was delivery, maybe a neighbor, maybe... The knock came again. She stood, slowly, pulled the door open. Brian, he was soaked. His dress shirt clung to his frame, and his tie was gone. Water dripped from his hair onto his collar, but his eyes were dry, clear, focused. She didn't say a word, just stared at him, stunned. "I needed to see you," he said. Emily stepped back instinctively, one hand still holding the doorknob. "You think just showing up here fixes everything?" Her voice cracked. "No," Brian replied. "I don't." She crossed her arms, holding herself tight. "You think giving up a project erases what people said about me? About us?" His voice stayed calm. "That wasn't the point." "Then what was?" He hesitated, just for a beat. "I've spent my whole life controlling everything," he said quietly. "Boardrooms, negotiations, outcomes. But the second you walked in that ballroom, none of that worked anymore." Emily looked away. Her throat tightened. "I thought if I gave you space, you'd see that I'm not trying to manipulate you. I just..." He stepped forward slightly. "Can't keep pretending that I don't feel something when I do." Her eyes burned. "And what exactly do you feel?" "That I'm terrified," he said, voice dropping, almost a whisper. "Because I've never cared about someone who could actually hurt me." The room held still. Brian took another step. Rainwater glistened on his sleeve. "I'm not here to demand anything. If you're done, if you've decided, I'll walk away." He paused. "But if there's even a part of you that still wonders, then don't send me away yet." Emily's chest rose and fell in short, uneven breaths. Her hands trembled. "You don't get to say all the right words and expect me to just fall into your arms," she whispered. "I know." Silence. Then, her voice cracked again. "I don't know what to do with this." "You don't have to decide now," he said gently. "But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere, unless you tell me to." He held out his hand, not grabbing, not pulling, just offering. She looked at it. At him. And then, without another word, she reached for him. But instead of taking his hand, she kissed him. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't graceful. It was shaky, full of anger and longing and fear. But it was real. His hands came to her shoulders, her back, drawing her in as if she were the only thing anchoring him in the world. The rain fell harder outside. But inside, everything was still. They didn't need to say anything else. Not tonight. Because in that moment, after all the silence, the tension, the distance, they had finally stopped running and started choosing. Emily and Brian didn't fall into love. They learned it slowly, like two people relearning how to walk after injury. Their mornings became quiet rituals. Coffee, a silent glance, a touch on the arm. Evenings brought takeout containers, jazz playing low, and the soft weight of her legs draped over his as they watched old black and white films. Brian, once a man obsessed with control, found comfort in unpredictability. When Emily burned the toast or rearranged his perfectly alphabetized bookshelf. She, in turn, began to trust the silences. Trust that if he said nothing, it wasn't distance, but peace. They were still themselves. Emily still made sarcastic remarks about his board meetings. Brian still triple-checked hotel bookings like the world might end if the pillows weren't firm enough. But they met in the middle. Again and again. Then came the offer. A prestigious project abroad. Emily's dream. Months overseas. A career-defining opportunity. When she told Brian, her voice trembled. "I don't know what to do." He didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window, where dusk spilled gold over the city skyline. Finally, he turned to her. "You should go." She blinked. "You mean that?" "I do," he nodded. "But Emily..." She looked up. "I don't want to love you through a screen." The words were honest, not a demand, not a plea, just the truth. Plain, painful, and full of love. That night, neither of them slept, but for the first time, they didn't hold each other to avoid the silence. They held each other because of it. He planned it quietly. No grand gestures, no violin quartets or flash mobs, just a return to where everything began. The same hotel, the same candlelight, the same room where a spilled glass of wine once introduced two strangers. Emily stepped in, unsure why he'd asked her to dress up, why she was back here after so long. But then she saw the flowers, lavender and white peonies, and the small table in the corner. 2 glasses of whiskey, one already half full. She smiled. "You kept the theme." Brian didn't move. "I kept everything." She turned and froze. Her father stood by the door. He hadn't wanted this, not the CEO, not the headlines, not the heartbreak risk, but tonight he was here. Silent but present. And with a quiet nod, he gave his blessing. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Brian approached slowly, then knelt. He didn't fumble. He didn't rehearse a speech. His voice was low, sure. "I'm not perfect. I won't promise to never hurt you. But I will promise this. If you ever fall again, I'll be there. I'll catch you." Emily laughed through the tears. "You're lucky I'm clumsy." And she said yes. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. A small garden, warm spring air, laughter from friends who had seen it all, her father by her side. Emily walked toward Brian, this time in heels that didn't wobble, on a path she'd chosen herself. Brian watched her, his hands steady, his heart full. And when she reached him, she whispered, "I didn't trip." He smiled. "I wouldn't have let you fall." They didn't need a fairy tale. They just needed each other, and they had that. Finally. Have you ever fallen for someone your heart couldn't resist, even when your mind told you to walk away? And if this story moved you, rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments. Was it touching? Unexpected? Honest? We'd love to hear what resonated most with you. And don't forget to subscribe, because next time, we're diving into part 2. After I Do, Is Love Still Enough?